What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're taking a look at the free hit for Game Week 32. So I'm going to go through some quick thoughts, then take a look at the shortlist, and then we'll take a look at the draft itself. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Now, hopefully at this stage, most of you have already decided when to free hit. And for most people, it's either going to be this week in Game Week 32 or the double in Game Week 34. There are other weeks you could look to use it, but I don't think there's any real big upside in doing that. So for most of you, it's going to be 32 or 34. And the reason I say hopefully you've already decided is because that would have dictated your transfers over the last few weeks. So anyone free hitting in 32 might have sold more of their Arsenal players and perhaps bought more Man United players, for example. Anyone free hitting in 34 would have possibly done the opposite. If you are someone that's left your options open, I feel like for most people, it's just going to make more sense to delay the free hit until Game Week 34 now. So if you've got like 8 to 9 players that are playing in Game Week 32 and they're pretty decent, it's only going to take another 1 to 2 transfers to put out a pretty good side, right? So you could sell the likes of Fernandes or Rashford, bring in some more players that are playing in 32. It doesn't really matter not having them for 33 because it spurs away. And in the 34, you can free hit them back. You're not worried about how long Rashford might be out for and stuff like that. So if you're close to a good Game Week 32, so I think you just delay it till 34. It's more fun free hitting in a double game week anyway. And you might turn around and say, well, why aren't you doing that? It just made more sense for my team not to do it. But if you're close to a good team in 32, I would just delay it till 34 now. If you're someone like me that is going into 32 with like 8 or 9 players missing, just activate the free hit, right? It's not going to be worth taking loads of hits and delaying until 34. The big decision for free hit 32 is which 3 Arsenal and Liverpool players you pick, because that's going to determine which other spots you need to then think about. And I'm a big fan of trying to limit the amount of decisions you have to make. So picking those 6 players is going to be key to which other spots you have to think about. So for example, if you go for triple Arsenal attack, and you want Salah, and you want another Liverpool attacker, then you need to give the defence quite a lot of thought. Because outside of like Trent, Robertson and an Arsenal defender, the picks get quite difficult. Whereas if you're happy to go for 2 Arsenal attackers and only Salah, then the defence is really easy to pick, because you probably just go for Trent, Robertson and an Arsenal defender. But then you've got to give a bit more consideration to the differential attackers. So my suggestion for anyone free hitting this week is pick which 6 players you want from those 2 teams, and then worry about the other 5 spots. So just some quick thoughts. Like I said, if you're close to a good team for 32, I would just free hit in 34 now. And if you've got loads of players blanking, it's easy. Just activate the chip and get it over with. Let's take a look at the shortlist. All right, let's run through the shortlist of players that I'm actually considering. I'll also talk about why certain players and teams haven't made it onto the list as well. We'll start off with Arsenal. Now, their first choice front 4 is Saka, Martinelli, Odegaard and Jesus. So I'm definitely going to have at least 2, maybe even 3 of those 4 names, because although results haven't gone great for Arsenal recently, 2 draws in a row, they are still scoring goals. They got 2 against Liverpool and West Ham, and you'd back them to score at least that amount, if not more, against Southampton. So I've got no issues back in the attack. The only slight thing on my mind is Trossard keeps getting subbed on for Jesus. So if we're talking about minutes, Jesus is probably the most at risk of getting subbed off first. But also in the last game, Nketiah was on the bench and came on too. So we might now see, if they're either chasing the game or if it's comfortable and they need to make subs, the Jesus off for Nketiah and Trossard possibly off for Martinelli might be subs that we see a little bit more often. So you might say that Saka and Odegaard are the most nailed for minutes, as has been for most of the season, but I don't think it would let me put me off buying Martinelli and Jesus. And right now, Martinelli is the second midfielder that I want on my free hit team. But that's just something to think about. In terms of the defence, maybe it's a little bit different in terms of being happy to back them, because Saliba's out at the moment. Zinchenko missed the last game as well. They are 2 big misses to that team. So you could make a case to back against the Arsenal defence on free hit, but I still think that Southampton at home is such a good fixture that if I only wanted 2 attackers, I would definitely put an Arsenal defender in as well. For me, I've backed Gabriel as my Arsenal defender of choice all season, so I would just stick with him. But as a lot of people have pointed out, Ben White has been returning pretty consistently, and although he wasn't really seen as a natural right back before he joined Arsenal, he has done very well in that position and he has improved. So I like him as a pick, but I would just personally go for Gabriel. That's just preference. With Brentford, the only reason I've even put Raya up for consideration is because I think there's a lack of goalkeepers to choose from this week, especially when you think about the outfield players you're going to target. So 3 outfield players from Arsenal and Liverpool means you can't have Alisson and Ramsdale, etc. For what it's worth, I think Brentford will concede, so I probably won't go for Raya, but I'll almost certainly go for Tony. He's only scored 1 goal in the last 3 game weeks, and I feel like the conversations around him have got less and less, probably because people have sold him because of the yellow card suspension and stuff like that. But he's not going to be suspended for this game against Aston Villa. So unless he gets banned before the deadline on Friday, I think he's a great pick. He's actually one of the first choice forwards into my team. I think he's great. There's just nothing to dislike about him. And although Villa defence has been very good recently, I think in some of the away games, specifically against Chelsea and West Ham, they were a little bit lucky not to concede more. So I think the defence has definitely improved, and so has the attack. And Emery is doing a fantastic job. But how good they've done recently is definitely not going to put me off buying Tony. So I think he'll almost certainly be on the free hit. With Villa, how can I not consider Watkins? He's been so good recently. It'd be really hard to leave him out. I do think both Brentford and Villa will concede in that game. I'm hoping it's one of those where it's like 2 or 3 goals each. The 1 or 2 players that I don't have on the list are obviously Mings and Alex Moreno. Now, Alex Moreno, very attacking. I think he's also started like the last 6 or 7 games as well. So the worries that I've got around Lucas Dean, I probably have to lower them a little bit. But I still think that is a very difficult game to go and get a clean sheet in, which is why he's not on the list. For your actual team, Villa have got some pretty good fixtures coming up. So it's Brentford away in 32. If you're not free hitting, obviously you don't have to worry about playing a defender in that game because there's no use using a transfer on them. Fulham at home in 33. Man United away in 34 is tricky enough, but in 35 it's Wolves away. I would say if I had a Villa defender outside of free hit, I'd be very happy right now. But on the free hit specifically, it's just not a defence that I'm going to personally target. So that's why Alex Moreno's not on there. For Crystal Palace, it's Johnston, Anderson as defensive options, and then Eze and Elise in attack, who have done very well recently. Eze 2 goals at the weekend, Elise 3 assists the week before that as well. I think with the fixture they've got this week, and I'm just going to double check what it is before I forget, it is Everton at home, right? Everton defence, really bad. So if I'm looking for a punt in midfield, they are definitely the 2 players I would pick. But there are also a lot of good midfield options. So Salah, Saka, Martinelli, Odegaard, maybe even James Maddison, who I'll come on to in a minute. That's 5 straight away. And I might not even be playing a 3-5-2. I may end up on a 3-4-3. So if I leave Eze and Elise out, it's not because I think they're really bad. It's just because there's only 4 or 5 midfield slots. And although Everton at home is a good fixture, there's quite a few other midfielders I like. I think if I get past those 5 names I've just mentioned, the Crystal Palace players would be next up on my list. But I still worry there's just I don't know. I guess when you see a player suddenly do really well, of course, Roy Hodgson has come in, so maybe that is a big impact on why they're playing the way they are. I don't think we can completely ignore that. But I also worry this is just a very short-term thing and it's not going to continue. And I just don't know if I want to free hit them in for that reason. So I'm probably a little bit lower on Crystal Palace players than a lot of others, but they could definitely still make it into my team. The defence I'm very interested in. Johnston in goal, nice and cheap. Obviously, Guaita out at the moment. Everton, not a team you would expect a huge amount of goals from, especially when they're away from home. So Johnston's probably my number 1 keeper right now. And if I need a defender, it'll probably be Anderson, just because his expected goals and expected assists are slightly higher than the likes of Gay and Mitchell. And bonus-wise, none of them are particularly great. But to be honest with you, there's hardly anything in it. So if you want to go for Mitchell or Gay instead, that's exactly what you should do. Looking at the next few teams, if I click the right button here, Leicester. How am I considering 3 players from Leicester? I think I am. Everson instead of Johnston, possibly an option. Castagna in defence. Now, don't get me wrong. I have got no interest in the Leicester defence long term. I do not want them anywhere near my team for the rest of the season. But for a 1 game week punt against Wolves, who don't score a huge amount of goals, I know they've just scored 2 against Brentford, but generally don't score a huge amount of goals, would it be the worst thing? Probably not, right? If it's between Johnston and Everson in goal, I think the Crystal Palace defence is definitely better right now. But in terms of attacking potential, Castagna is definitely ahead of any of the Crystal Palace players. So there is a part of me that is tempted to go there, but it is a one game week punt just to do something a little bit different on free hit. They are not players that I'll be looking to bring in long term for my team. And then James Maddison. Right now, lots of people sick of him, selling him from their teams, etc. Blanked the last 4 games. I completely get it. I think the Man City game was another one where he was a little bit unlucky not to return. And I feel like I've said that a lot about James Maddison recently. I'm not saying he's played amazing in every game, or Leicester certainly haven't played amazing. But generally, he has been a little bit unlucky over the last 5 to 6 weeks, maybe not to get a few more returns. And I know people kind of get sick of players like that. They want the returns, which absolutely makes sense. But if I see players playing well, then I think the returns are coming, and you just have to hope you get them on the right week. And so because everyone is sick of Maddison and is selling him, that kind of makes me more tempted just to free hit him in. Because if he does really well, then continues to blank, that's great for me, because I'm not going to bring him into my actual team. So I know, like I said, people are sick of Maddison, but he's definitely on the table for consideration for me. Essentially, in a 3-5-2, it'll be Maddison versus Eze versus Elise. And I know Elise and Eze have got the form, but we know what Maddison is capable of. So he's definitely not off the table as an option for me. With Liverpool, realistically, the only 3 players that are probably going to make the team are Trent, Robertson and Salah. They are probably my preferred midfield 3. Gakpo, Darwin and Jota could definitely do damage against a team like Forest. I'm just not sure if I'm prepared to guess who's going to start, because Luis Diaz is back now, so he could get minutes off the bench as well. Firmino is obviously an option. They've just got lots of players there. For what it's worth, if I was going to choose another player, it would be Darwin Núñez. But if I'm not confident he starts, I just probably won't go there. And if I do, it means I've got to get rid of Robertson, which then means I've got to pick another defender. And I think defenders, they're really lacking this week, right? I think if you don't have an Arsenal defender and you take out one of the Liverpool ones as well, there's not a huge amount of other options that I can get excited about. So we'll see. If we get an early team leak, which is probably unlikely because it's a Friday deadline and Liverpool playing on Saturday, and Darwin starts, I'll be very tempted by him. But outside of that, I think Trent, Robertson and Salah are probably the 3 they're going to get you the most minutes. Bournemouth, Solanke, obvious, been very good recently. Some people might look at Billing. I just don't think he's going to make it in ahead of any other midfielders, so I've not put him on the shortlist. Definitely not going for a defender. With West Ham, I think Jared Bowen has looked pretty good recently. He's also nailed on for minutes. Benrahma is the penalty taker, but I just don't think you can be absolutely sure when he's going to start. So that's what worries me about him. And I just probably wouldn't go for a defender because of how well Bournemouth are attacking right now and how good Solanke is. So I think only player I'm looking at is Bowen. And again, that would just be a punt. So it's like Maddison versus Eze versus Elise versus Bowen as well. It's just that 4th or 5th spot. How kind of punty do I want to go? Or do I want to go with just kind of a safer option, right? That's something I'll have to decide. And then lastly, because there's quite a few players, Newcastle, Trippier, Isak and Wilson. I think Wilson is just a bit too hard to know when he's going to start at the moment. So it would have to be Isak. I think the way Spurs are defending and the way Newcastle are attacking, especially at home, not a bad pick whatsoever. There's actually a lot of forwards to look at. Tony, Kane, Watkins, Solanke, Isak, just to name 6, right? There's a lot of forwards you could put on your free hit. I think with Trippier, I think because he's at home and because of how attacking he is, you've got to consider him. But he is playing against Harry Kane. And I know Spurs haven't been great, but Kane has. So it just worries me a little bit. But he has to be up for consideration. And then Kane is the only player from Newcastle. Just really quickly, looking at the other teams, Fulham and Leeds is the kind of game where there could be a lot of goals for either side, but I'm just not sure I'd be confident picking which player that is. So you've got like Harrison or Sinistera from Leeds potentially, Willian maybe from Fulham. But again, do I want to risk that versus the other midfielders I can choose from? Probably not. Bamford, Vinicius isn't nailed on without Mitrovic either. So there's not really any forwards I want to go for, and definitely not defenders. So that's why I've ignored them. So Southampton for good reason. They're against Arsenal. Everton just... I don't expect them to keep a clean sheet, and their attackers aren't good enough. Wolves don't score enough goals, and I think even Leicester will go and win that game. I don't want to say comfortably, but I think they'll win that game. Nottingham Forest, too difficult a fixture, and that is it. I've considered players from everyone else. So I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of players I've missed. If there are, let me know in the comments below. But essentially, they are the only players I'm looking at, and they are all the reasons why certain players are not on that list, like Alex Moreno. All right, let's take a look at the draft itself, and we'll start off with the defence. And as I go through, I'll also talk about which players are pretty much locked in as well. One of those players is probably Sam Johnson. I'm fairly sure he's going to be the goalkeeper that I end up going with. I do have money in the bank if I want to go a bit more expensive. I just don't necessarily think there's any need to. When I'm picking the draft, I'm mostly trying to target players with a home fixture where possible. And when you look at the fixture list, the only clean sheets that I think are fairly obvious are Arsenal and Liverpool. I think there's a good chance that Newcastle, Bournemouth, Brentford and Fulham will all concede. So that only leaves Palace and Leicester. And obviously Leicester not a great defence, but they're playing a team that doesn't score a huge amount of goals. And Palace defence may be a little bit better. And again, Everton, another team that don't score massive amount of goals. So I think by process of elimination and the fact that I'm going to have 3 outfield players from Liverpool and Arsenal means that Johnson has to be the goalkeeper. Maybe I'll change my mind, but he feels pretty locked in at the moment. So does Trent Alexander-Arnold. We obviously haven't seen Liverpool play in Game Week 31 yet. They've got Leeds on Monday evening. But I don't think it matters whether Trent plays his, right back role that he's done for a long time or plays this more inverted role. He's the most creative, one of the most creative players in the team. Certainly when it comes to attack and returns from the defence, he's the most likely to get one either way. So he's definitely in for me. I know the Liverpool defence hasn't been great this season, certainly not up to the standards we expect, but Nottingham Forest don't score a huge amount of goals, especially away from home. So Trent is locked in. I think for reasons I've mentioned in the shortlist section, Robertson's pretty much locked in as well. I think because Diaz is only just back from injury, and we're only likely to see him get minutes off the bench for the next few weeks, the first choice front three is probably Darwin, Gakpo and Salah. But outside of Salah, I'm just not sure I'm prepared to guess who's going to get the most amount of minutes, which is why Darwin or Gakpo just aren't in this team. I think Robertson is a lot safer. Obviously, Tsimikas is there. So if Klopp decides that Robertson needs a rest, maybe Tsimikas will play that game. And the one thing to note going into Game Week 32 is that the Game Week 33 deadline is on Tuesday. So Liverpool play Saturday and then they play again on Wednesday. Now, they've done that loads of times, right? Premier League, Champions League, Premier League, Champions League, etc. So I'm sure Robertson will be fine. But if Klopp did want to rest some players, are you going to do it away to West Ham on Wednesday or home to Forest on Saturday? You're probably going to do it at home to Forest. So I don't think it's a dead cert that Robertson starts, but I think it's pretty likely. So that's why he's in the team, and I'm just backing Liverpool to get a clean sheet in that game. Trippier is the one I'm least sure about. Now, there's not a huge amount of defenders to pick from this week outside of Liverpool and Arsenal, which is why he's in there now kind of by default. I'm also slightly worried about backing against the crowd because everyone not on a free hit is going to have Trippier, and most people on a free hit are also going to pick him. So his ownership is going to still be incredibly high. And I think the Newcastle defence has been very good this season, especially at home. But they are playing Spurs. And as bad as Spurs might have been in a lot of people's eyes, Harry Kane has scored a lot of goals. And all it takes is one to get rid of that clean sheet. The problem is, if Trippier does get an assist, and they do keep a clean sheet, you know that's a 12-pointer. And is there another defender that I'm prepared to say can match what Trippier can do? I'm not sure there is. And that is where the problem comes. The one player I wouldn't even say keen, I'm kind of tempted by is Castagna. Because I don't think Wolves score massive amounts of goals. I do think there is a chance they're going to get a clean sheet in that game. And he's probably the most attacking defender they have. So I am considering going for him over Trippier. But when you say it out loud, that sounds kind of scary, right? And I think I'm just looking at the fixtures now for 32. Leicester play at 3 o'clock on Saturday. Newcastle don't play until 2 o'clock on Sunday. So if Castagna gets that clean sheet wiped, which I guess because it's Leicester is kind of likely, and doesn't get an attack and return, and then backing against a Trippier who's going to be massively owned, I just don't know if I want to do that. So Trippier, from the 4 players in the 11, is probably the default pick just because there's not anyone else that stands out. But I'm very tempted for 1 week only, where I'm definitely going to have Trippier back in my team from 33 onwards, just to take that risk and go for someone like Castagna instead. I'm looking at the fixture list on the other side of this screen. I can't really see any other defenders that I'm tempted by. I guess Crystal Palace. So I could go for a double up, Johnston and Anderson, for example. But I just think that Castagna is a bit more attacking. If I'm going to go against Trippier, I want to do it with someone with a bit of upside that could get me an attack and return, as well as or instead of a clean sheet. So Trippier's in for now. I'm sure he's in most of your free hit squads. Is anyone considering going without him? If so, who are you going for instead? Let me know down in the comments. All right, let's take a look at the midfield, and we'll start with the easy ones. You might have already guessed it, but if Salah is fit and available, he is 100% locked into my free hit squad. There's no way I'm going to go without him. Nottingham Forest at home on paper looks like a great fixture. I'm expecting Liverpool to score a few goals, and in those front three attacking spots, Salah is the only one that I can realistically expect to start every game. Everyone else is somewhat of a minutes risk. So Salah has to be in. I also think he's probably going to keep penalties as well, and is likely to be my captain. I think Saka is in a similar position to Salah, where I don't see me going without him, right? He's one of the first names on this free hit draft. He has also missed a penalty recently, so there is a chance he would get taken off of them. If that does happen, whoever gets them obviously then goes up in terms of FPL potential, but we don't know that right now. And even if Saka does lose penalties, he's absolutely nailed to start and always gets good minutes as well. So he's in the team no matter what. There is a conversation to be had longer term that if he loses penalties, he's then not suddenly above Martinelli or Odegaard, because their underlying numbers are quite similar. The thing that puts Saka ahead is the fact he's on penalties. But that's a conversation for kind of longer term thinking. I'm only caring about the free hit right now. So Saka is definitely in. And I think so is Martinelli, because recently he's looked great. And I also think it really helps him when Trossard or Jesus is the number 9 rather than Nketiah, because he can come a little bit more central at times. Those two players are much happier to drop deep to collect the ball, or maybe drift wide and let Martinelli come inside. And for that reason, I think he's got to be in. I don't think Odegaard is a bad pick, but if I'm going 1 week only, I'm going to go for Martinelli, because I think he's got more chance of scoring. Even though Odegaard was the one that scored in the last game, that's how I kind of feel about it. With Odegaard, obviously, as most of you have already realised, if I've got Martinelli, Saka and Odegaard, I don't have Jesus. I think by the time we get to the deadline, I'll probably have switched to Gabriel Jesus, because his goal threat is definitely higher. I'm just a little bit worried that he is the one that keeps getting subbed off, because he's probably not at 100% match fitness, because he was out for a little while and they're obviously building that up. And they've got Trossard and now Nketiah on the bench who can come on for him. Whereas with Odegaard, there are players like Vieira that can come on, but it doesn't happen that often. Odegaard often gets to 80 to 90 minutes, and that's why I'm looking at him. The other thing is, on a 1 game week only basis, midfielders, that extra point for a goal, extra point for a clean sheet, it can really quickly add up to getting a bigger haul a little bit easier. Not to say that Odegaard will definitely outscore Jesus, but that is on my mind as well, just to back the midfielder with the minutes, rather than the forward that only gets 4 points for a goal and possibly is going to get subbed off early. So I think I will end up on Jesus, but right now I'm feeling like 3 Arsenal midfielders might be better. I would like an Arsenal defender as well, but I don't think there's... basically, it comes down to Trippier and Odegaard versus something like Elise or Eze or Bowen plus Gabriel. Now, if I get the right midfielder, I think going for the Arsenal defender is probably better, but I don't know if I'm willing to kind of risk that I do get it right. So going for the third Arsenal attacker and just picking a defender, Trippier or Castagna, might be the way around that I go. But that is something that's on my mind. And then with Maddison, I just think he's been a bit unlucky recently to not get more returns. I don't think he's like this amazing pick, which is absolutely essential. Far from it. But I think I just can't see him going forward, continuing to not get goals or assists. And I think Wolves at home is a pretty decent fixture. And I also like the fact that everyone else is sick of him, because it means his ownership is lower and people are going to continue to sell him because he blanked again against Man City, even though I'm not quite sure how he didn't get a goal or an assist in that game. So especially towards the end. So I quite like him, but he's definitely not locked in. I think Salah, Saka and Martinelli pretty much are. Maddison definitely not. I just don't know if I'm as convinced as everyone else that Eze and Elise are much better picks. I think I'm almost more likely just to go for Bowen instead. Maybe I've got it wrong. Maybe what everyone else is seeing that Hodgson is doing is not what I'm seeing, and I've got it wrong, right? I'm often wrong about a lot of stuff, but I don't know. There's something about Maddison, all set pieces and stuff like that. I just feel like he should be in this free hit draft. But like I said, definitely not nailed. Could change by the deadline. It's just whether, and the other thing is just whether to go for Odegaard, Jesus, or a defender instead. They're the kind of things I'm thinking about with midfield. And then up front, it's Watkins and Toney. And I don't think I need to spend too long telling you why they're both good picks. When they're not banned, suspended, or injured, they're both absolutely nailed on. The minutes are good. The goal threat is decent. I know Toney has only scored 1 goal in the last 3 and stuff like that, but his underlying numbers are still great. With Watkins, he just cannot stop scoring right now, and they're both on penalty. So in terms of picks. They're both brilliant. I think there is a tendency on free hit to pick players you don't already own because it's just a bit more fun. So there is part of me thinking that with Watkins, because even if I don't pick him on free hit, he's still going to be in my team for game week 33. But at the same time, you should just be looking to pick the best players. And right now, it's hard to back against Watkins. The more interesting conversation is probably about the forwards that I haven't picked. So Solanke is on the bench because obviously he's nice and cheap. I can afford to have him there. He's been in great form recently. And like those two, he's absolutely nailed on. And he is penalty taker as well. Now, Bournemouth haven't had one yet this season. There are a couple where they probably should have had them, but the calls have gone against them. When they finally do get him, Solanke's going to be even better value than he is right now. And West Ham are not a team, especially away from home, that I would expect to keep a huge amount of clean sheets. But am I prepared to just back the home fixture and put Solanke in instead of Watkins? I'm not sure I am, given how well Watkins has been playing recently and the fact that I think Brentford and Villa are both going to concede this week. So that's why I've chose those two ahead of Solanke. Isak is another consideration. Part of my brain will not let me think that Spurs at home is an okay fixture. I still see that as a fairly difficult one, even though Newcastle at home have been brilliant and Spurs' defence hasn't been great. The problem with Isak is, if Wilson's not on the pitch, he's on penalties, and he probably will start, but because he got benched a couple of weeks ago, even though it was around a double game week, so fixtures in quick succession, etc., it still makes me worry a little bit. And is Isak against Spurs at home better than Watkins or Toney? I'm just not sure he is. The one forward that I'm really worried about is Harry Kane, because everyone not on a free hit pretty much is probably going to own him, or his ownership is still going to be quite high. And I feel like I've seen a lot of free hit drafts without him, and it feels like people are too easily just not included. Now, I'm being a bit of a hypocrite because I also am not including him here. And when you do put Harry Kane in with Saka and Salah, etc., and Trent and Robertson, money does become quite tight. So without Kane, there's money to burn, but with him, it becomes a lot more difficult to fit him in. And look, Newcastle away is not a good fixture for anyone, but Kane's consistency this season has been so good, you'd still expect him to score. I guess the thing that I'm thinking about is, do I expect him to get 2 or 3 goals against Newcastle? Probably not. But when you're absolutely nailed on for 90 minutes in the penalty taker, anything can happen, right? Kane could play badly and still get 2 goals against that Newcastle team. So I'm a little bit worried. But again, if I'm going to back against someone that also makes the rest of the team easier to put together because of budget, maybe it should be Harry Kane. So I would say with this team, the midfield is not much of a problem for me. I'd be happy having to play that 5. If I want to swap Odegaard to Jesus, fair enough. The bigger issues are Trippier. Is he... I mean, he is quite exciting because his attacking potential has been so good this season. But there's something about him where it feels like I should go somewhere else. But the issue is there's a lack of defenders. Whereas with the forwards, the indecision is because there's so many options. I've worried I've got the wrong ones. But I would say this is not far off how the draft will end up looking. I think Johnston, Trent, Martinelli, Salah, Saka and Toney are probably nailed on. I also think I'll end up on Robertson. So that's 7 players that are likely to make the draft. It's just Trippier, Maddison, Odegaard and Watkins. They are really the 4 spots that I'm thinking about. And for a lot of you, it's going to be the same. You're going to overthink the whole team. But realistically, it's only about 3 or 4 players you need to spend the next 4 days thinking about. So let me know what you think about that draft. Let me know how it's exactly the same as everyone else's you've seen already. If you've enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And I'll catch you again soon.